oh my God, this has happened to me. That's what it was. And you said earlier, just by putting a label on it doesn't make you feel so stupid. You're part of a group that this has happened to.
Exactly.
Did you push record?
Thanks again for tuning in to Second Act TV. I want to welcome Tina Gesso back to Second Act. Thank you, Tina, for joining me again.
Thanks for having me back, Silka.
Yeah. Well, Tina is a dating coach. She is also a Jack Canfield trainer, and she helps women over 40, 50, and beyond find love again after 50. And you work with men too, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes, mostly women though, but it's really, you know what? It's really great to see things from both perspectives. So it helps me by having both because I'm looking at both perspectives.
This conversation, I think, might be kind of fun and funny. I ran across an article, in fact, I sent it to you, that really illustrates how far we've come in the dating world. So if you haven't been out there yet and haven't dated online or haven't cyber dated, there's now actual slang that you need to know or actions and activity that happens online that you need to be aware of that there are red flags like this isn't going anywhere or here somebody that's really interested in me. So let's talk about that, some of the key terms, and we'll do the ones the bad ones first because we don't want people falling into these traps. But catfishing, breadcrumbing, and ghosting.
Yeah, dating is not what it was 10 or 20 years ago, Silka, right? So we never had these types of terminology. The behaviors were always there, they just didn't have a name. Right. So the first one that you mentioned, I think, was ghosting. And that's when somebody, just kind of drops out of sight, right? They could be in the middle of texting you. They could have said, that was a great date. Let me call you tomorrow. And you never hear from them again, or even weeks or months later. And it's just not nice. It really doesn't feel good for somebody to just, drop off the planet all of a sudden when you thought that you had a good thing going. And the other one was breadcrumbing.
Yes.
Right. So breadcrumbing, you just have to go back to when I think of breadcrumbs, I think of Hansel and Gretel, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of that type of thing where people just feed you enough, either a guy or a girl, give you enough attention, send enough text to keep you interested. But basically, what they're doing is stringing you along. And it doesn't lead anywhere. And the destructive thing about that is that you end up, I just coached a client through this actually just last week. And she was calling me every few days because she kept saying, like, he's such a great guy. He's told me that he's interested. We're talking about going on vacation with our kids together, yet he never follows through for a proper date. She's thinking that what's wrong with her?
Right.
Right? What is she doing wrong?
Right.
So it can be a real attack against your self-esteem. So it's, what was really empowering in that, Silka, is the fact, and this is maybe kind of weird to say, is just the fact that I put a name to it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is called breadcrumbing, and this is an article, and this is a common thing. So she was able to detach herself. She didn't take it personal anymore.
Exactly. That's why I think it's so important to do these segments, as juvenile
Yeah.
as it sounds. This is, and it does pertain more to online, like, ghosting.
Yes.
That's horrible. Talk about self-esteem.
Yes.
What did I do wrong? All of a sudden you had a great time and they disappear. And that's super easy to do in our online culture. It's breadcrumbing. Yeah. Text, 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 text. We didn't text. I mean, I guess all that, like you said, it existed, but not to this extent, and not, it wasn't as, that was always hurtful, but it just wasn't as prevalent, I don't believe.
Yeah, because, it's just the whole nature of doing things online and virtually. There's a certain anonymity, and people who wouldn't necessarily resort to that kind of bad behavior, I think, feel it's okay because they have that anonymity, and maybe they had it done to them. And so it's like bad behavior all of a sudden becomes socially acceptable. But in my books, that's never acceptable.
No.
Although if you've had it done to yourself enough times, you begin to think, really, it's not a big deal. One thing about ghosting, though, that I think is worth mentioning, Silk, I read this in an article recently, and I don't think this is actually such a bad thing to kind of look at or accept. So let's say that you're simply texting back and forth on the app and all of a sudden the person disappears. That's not fun. But since there's so many profiles and so many people that you interact with, often at the same time, just take it. That's just one of the rules of the game, that might happen, that a person may drop off. If it happens after you've actually made contact, where you've had a Zoom or a FaceTime or had an actual date, then that becomes a little more nasty. And this is one thing I really encourage my clients to do: never do it yourself. Right. So, what my client recently, the same client a few weeks before, had a situation where, after a date, she just wasn't really into him. And she said, "Oh, well, maybe I just won't answer his text." I said, "Just entertain the idea of actually breaking it off nicely.
Yeah.
And do you want me to give her what I give to, or mention what I had suggested to her to say?"
Sure.
Okay. And that is basically, it's really straightforward. I had a really great time. You're a really great guy, but I'm just not feeling it right now. And I don't think that we're going to be a match. And I just wish you all the best in your journey towards finding love, something along those lines. She did it twice. And on both occasions, the gentleman wrote back and said, "Oh, a dagger to the heart." But they said they were very grateful
Right.
that she had broken it off in that way. And I think when you behave well, it becomes like a ripple effect, right? You may have an effect on the next person going forward that you did that with.
Exactly. I totally agree. Totally. Great advice. Catfishing, I don't want to spend even a whole bunch of time on. That's like the worst of the worst. It's when somebody is not who they are. And unfortunately, it's something that happens a lot. What advice do you give in terms of spotting and dealing with a catfisher?
Well, Silka, you didn't know this, but I was really royally catfished myself last year. And I'm not going to get into the whole story, but just suffice it today. He always, when somebody gives you all the time these excuses for not going on a Zoom or a FaceTime or getting together, and they may seem very plausible excuses, but if you're not able to do that within, let's say, a week or so, that's a sign that it could be a catfisher. Another sign of a catfisher is somebody that, I don't know why this happens to be. Maybe they all hang out in the same, in the same club, these catfishers, but oftentimes they work on rigs. They say they work on rigs. They're engineers. They're from a different country, so that if you do talk to them on the phone, it's a way to explain away their accent, that type of thing. And it's
Interesting.
going to lead, sorry.
I said interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, and it's going to end. Their pictures look like something out of a magazine.
Hmm.
And when it looks to, and this guy that was catfishing me, oh my God. I mean, I showed my friends his pictures. Everybody was drooling over this guy. Like, my friends couldn't wait for us to get together, but it never materialized. And at a certain point, it often leads to them asking for money.
Yes.
Right? He had built up a whole scenario where I was very empathetic, and he had this tragedy happened and he needed money. And then I knew immediately that I was taken. But what was really eerie, Silke, and I think this is important for people to know, is that he knew my interests. He knew I was into personal development. Right. And he would talk about these philosophers and poets and all that kind of stuff. Like, how the heck do they know that? Maybe he found me on Facebook or what have you and saw what my interests are. It was really eerie, and it wasn't a fun
No,
experience.
they're very good, and they will put just with a little bit of research, they would find out about somebody like yourself or me, and we're out there. You Google our
Yes.
names, and there's enough information to put that
Yes.
together. But even if you're not in the public space like we are, it's very easy to find out stuff about you. So yes, just be careful of that. For me, the bottom line is somebody asks you for money, it's done. Done,
Yeah.
done, done. I don't care what the excuse is. So those are the three. Well, catfisher is just that's a scam. No.
Yes.
Ghosting, like you said, expect it because it's probably gonna happen. Don't make it a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's gonna happen. And then the breadcrumbing, you just have to decide, how long am I gonna let myself be strung, led on, so to speak. So Though, yeah, that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Oh,
Not in the way it does today. So be aware of it. What's fun is let's go something more fun is
yeah.
how we can now flirt differently. How these platforms have created an environment where we just interact differently, and that this is another term, tuning. I just learned this, tuning. How you tune into somebody on, the online that they're flirting with you. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it's a way of using the tools. People are so creative, and I think this is really cool how our society is developing so much faster now with social media and technology. So basically, you're showing that you're tuning into a person without getting really obvious or saying, "Oh my goodness, Silka, you just look so gorgeous today, and you do in that blue that really suits you, by the way."
Oh, thank
That
you.
sincere compliment. But instead of being overtly open with that type of thing, instead, you might get a wink emoji, right? If they say, if you tell them, okay, so let's to get together for a FaceTime, for example, they say thanks, but it's not just THANKS. Maybe they put 3 or 4 A's in there, right, with a little winky, or maybe even with a little kiss emoji.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you do become friends on Facebook or LinkedIn, what have you, and that they're liking your stuff without being, overtly
Hmm.
obvious, that's a really good sign that the person is really tuning into you.
Yeah, that is so funny. I mentioned to you off camera. I have a friend. Mind you, we're all we're in our early 60s or late 50s then.
Yes.
But there was a guy back from high school. He kept liking my friend's picture and said, "Debbie, hey, he keeps liking your picture. I think he likes you." She goes, "Oh no, he does." We were talking like 16-year-olds, and sure enough, they've been living together 4 years now. So in that
And
sense, the online environments can be really fun. I guess something else though to be aware of too, that is that there is, you can, I won't say you get into stalking or that kind of thing, but there's a, you can see if somebody else is also liking other people's stuff, and maybe that that can clue you in on be careful with this person or not.
right. So it's actually not a bad idea, Silka, to check out somebody's social media profile, right? Especially before you get together with them in real life, maybe a little bit post COVID. Just to give you an example, I met somebody, really interesting guy on Elite Singles, and I Googled him before because he was from another city. He was going to fly to Montreal, and we were going to get together. But yeah, when I checked him out on social media, you'll never believe it. He was a lawyer. He had a big law firm and all that kind of stuff. But he was actually recently arrested for beating his ex-wife, right? And I really felt lucky to have sidestepped that whole drama, right? So it's not a bad idea to look somebody up on social media and see how they portray themselves. I mean, that's a dramatic example. But I mean, just to see their behavior on Facebook, the type of posts that they're putting there, that type of thing. When you get to that point, it's really not a bad idea, which means let's turn the mirror back on ourselves, right? So just be aware of what you're putting out there. And, maybe if we're in our 40s and 50s, we're not out there, getting drunk every weekend, that kind of thing, and being out there partying, but still just be aware of what you're putting out there, and discredit, and when you're in doubt, maybe just don't put it up.
Yeah, yeah. Social media has definitely changed the dating world, both for the for the good. Some not so good. So it's not really, it doesn't really matter the judgment on it. It's how you interact with it, and I think that's why we do these videos to
Yes.
and provide examples of this can happen. Watch out for this. Here's a sign. And yeah, you do sometimes. Oh my God, this has happened to me. That's what it was. And you said earlier, just by putting a label on it doesn't make you feel so stupid. You're part of a group that this has happened to.
Exactly. So it's like starting and learning a brand new skill. And by the way, they're saying that, I mean, I read a lot of stats on this, right? That 70% of couples in the next 2 years are expected to meet through online dating. And especially now that we're going through something like COVID, and I think the repercussions of that are going to stick around for a while. Thank God we have online dating,
Right.
right?
Yeah. as much as people are frustrated with it, it's the number one way that people meet, and it's going to stay that way. And no matter what you think about it, one way or the other, people are going to meet virtually, and you might as well embrace it.
Exactly. And thankfully for shows like yourself, Second Act TV, these episodes are really about education, right? And preparing people and being able to, especially in the singles world after the age of 40 and 50, and just knowing some rules of engagement so you can manage your expectations, not take things so personal, and keep on going because many people, the majority of couples these days get together because of online dating. So it's a wonderful place. Just know what you're getting into and how to sidestep, potential traps or areas where you could really get stuck and enjoy it. It can really be a lot of fun. We were saying earlier, I mean, we feel like teenagers at times when we're, texting back and forth and things like that. And that's fun. If that puts a spark in your eye and a skip in your step and you feel like you're 16 again, that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Tina, there's so many things that I still want to talk with you about. We're at the end of the segment again already. We will, of course, link to all of your information so people can get in touch with you directly if they so choose. Tina, anything else that you want to add before we close out today?
Just one last thing. Thank you, Silka. And that is just to kind of wrap this whole discussion up with a bow. And that is not to wait to get into online dating. Don't think that you've got to have the absolute perfect pictures or the right approach or to be totally educated on online dating. Get started and maybe get some help along the way. And just going out there and listening to, shows such as your own can go a long way to help get you prepared. But get out there and get started and enjoy it. Really focus on having fun.
Thanks, Tina. We'll see you on our next segment of Second Act TV. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.